time. But to these three visionaries, it's all about exploration, saving lives, and the quest for creative expression. Step up to meet the extreme inventors, the ultimate toy maker, a genius composer, and the creator of a shark-stopping device.
Whatever happened to the future we envisioned? Why don't I have a rocket car just like George Jetson? Rocket guy, high above the earth. Rocket guy, he's our captain. Rocket guy.
Who on earth would ever have thought that inventing a simple toy could have made this guy from Bend, Oregon a fortune big enough to fund his own personal rocket? Well, that's Brian Walker, the rocket guy. In 2004, at the cost of $1 million, he aims to blast off for the stars on his first test run. And if all goes well, at 15,000 feet, he'll press the eject button and parachute back to Mother Earth. Is it dangerous? Well, yeah, but he's the rocket guy.
I've been inventing as long as I can remember because of that independent scientist/inventor type lifestyle. And I just kind of really like that idea. Plenty of times resigned to the fact that I wasn't going to make it and gave up and went out and got a real job. But I was never satisfied. It just wasn't me. And so there was something internally driving me and pushing me on.
Maybe Brian read too many popular mechanics mags as a kid. Now at 46, he's a young at heart, never say die inventor, a garage tinkerer, the sort of guy the neighbors ask, so, what exactly is it for? This is the overblown schoolboy's fantasy that will allow our Brian to boldly go, well, to boldly go up. That's the plan. Will it work? Well, hopefully a tad better than a few of his earlier star inventions.
I decided to take a hard hat and add a fan to it so it would circulate air. And then to power the fan, I'd put solar cells on it so it was powered by the sun. So when you wore the hat, you'd put it on and the air would be circulating around the inside, and it gave you, it was a little bit cooler, but the psychological advantage of feeling the air also had quite an effect too. It wasn't like an air-conditioned hard hat, but it did keep the air moving. So.
But Brian's cool headgear wasn't exactly the fastest moving product on Walmart's shelves. Back to the drawing board. This time, Brian figured what the world needed was a personal hovercraft with a front-mounted gun.
I wanted to set up a little indoor recreational area where people would float around on hovercraft and they'd have lasers on them and they could shoot each other and score points, kind of like a life-size pinball game. Last I heard several years ago was the prototype and the tooling ended up in the LA County landfill.
Next, a collapsible stretcher for the military, but the project collapsed faster than the stretcher did. And then there was this nifty little submarine for a Fiji resort, but the idea sank without a trace.
It was a miracle I even produced the first sub, but it had lots and lots of problems. And unfortunately, after a lot of time and effort, it just wasn't something that was going to happen. And like so many other things, it just went away. So, you know, as time moved on, I think a lot of people, a lot of friends and family began kind of looking at me and tipping their head about, you know, because between the ages of 20 and 35, I had 6 major failures to the point where I had to move back in with my folks, get my feet back on the ground.
20 years of effort, obsession, and disaster. One short, messy marriage. No kids or happy ever after here. But you can't hold a good inventor down for long. And finally, it looked like Brian's stars were beginning to line up.
The inspiration for this product actually came from aircraft instruments that use gyroscopes. Some of them use air. Laser Light, this was kind of a line of products. The Laser Light line was like this was the first toy I sold. And this is the triple beam laser light, and this was a little Starship laser light. And basically they were a very simple little toy. You push buttons and it would pop open, and then it does a little light show. You have to really be in a dark room to really be able to see it, but it has a little light that bounces around. Air bazooka and the power bazooka. And then there was another product called Heli Shots. In fact, this is the only one I have left, and there was a foam missile that went on here.
Of course, the military wasn't impressed, but every little tyke in the land could see for themselves that these were the coolest toys since the Frisbee. Brian's bank balance was getting back into the black. Everyone knows that the louder, the flashier, the more annoying a toy is to grown-ups, the more it'll appeal to kids. And Brian, still a kid at heart, knew it. Enter his pièce de résistance, the Light Chaser.
These are a couple samples of the Light Chaser, and it's basically became a huge hit in the Disney theme parks. That's where its big success came from, and they've got lots of different versions for Disney, and there's a lot of other generic versions of it. And it's amazing. This was probably a one afternoon project. It cost me about $5 in parts to build the original prototype, and now they make literally hundreds of different versions and styles, and it's just a wildly successful product. And I get emails from people all over the world. In fact, just recently got one from a man telling me that his son has Down syndrome, and when he heard I invented this, he wanted to tell me what this has meant to him. But it's just a simple little item, and yet, for some reason, it's just become a huge, huge hit. So that pretty much funds my project.
And the Light Chaser changed Brian Walker's life. Now a multi-millionaire, money worries don't keep him awake at night. But his next project, which puts him on top of a rocket hurtling into space, might just make up for it. Few people have the desire to hurtle against the odds into space. Even fewer have a fortune or the guts big enough to build and man their very own spaceship. But so far, over 6 years, Brian Walker's Light Chaser royalties have provided $500,000 to build this oversized flying cigar tube, or as he calls it, the ultimate erection.
This is my test rocket here. This is the one I'm going to be launching to 15,000 feet in, and I'll skydive from it, and the rocket will come down under its own parachute. But I'm using a catapult-assisted launch to where the rocket is actually boosted into the air using air pressure instead of relying on its own fuel source for the entire flight. I'd like to get Viagra to sponsor me on this. That's why I've got Viagra on here. They're not a sponsor as of yet, but I put it on there because I'm going to do some publicity shots and send it to them. If I get up in this thing soon enough, it'll be the first time a private citizen has gone up in a private rocket. Even though I'm only going 15,000 feet, there's never been a private vertical rocket launch with a person on board. That wasn't done by the Russians or the Americans.
Brian's confidence has to be admired. Blast off in something that sounds like a big bicycle pump, then parachute out through this sort of cat door at 15,000 feet. But is this really as simple as it sounds? Well, it's not a moonshot. It's half the height of regular airline travel. A little extreme for skydiving, but Brian won't face oxygen starvation. Not this time. But this is just the start. If he survives this mission, Project Rush, wrap it up super high, will set its sights a little higher. The full-size rocket shown here will go 50 miles up into the blue yonder. NASA, eat your heart out. The boy from Bend is getting set to give you a run for your money. Yet even Steve Bennett, whose aerospace company is a contender for the $10 million X Prize to be the first civilian group to put a man into space, thinks that Brian should think twice about his standalone mission.
Just about every aspect of his vehicle and the design and the way he's wanted to do it is kind of wrong, or it could certainly use improvement. You know, he really does need a bit of help. So if he continues on the course that he's set himself, he's going to end up in a wooden box. I don't want to see that happen, but, you know, that's up to him.
Naysayers be damned. Mr. Walker is deadly serious. He signed up at Russian space school for would-be astronauts, and he shot this home video to prove it. Now he's set for a gut-wrenching warm-up in a MiG fighter jet, just to get the feel. It's a boyhood dream come true.
Ever since the beginning of the space program, when I was just young, 5 or 6 years old, my earliest memories are of the beginning space program, and I wanted to be an astronaut like most kids in those days, but by the time I was 8 or 9 years old, I just kind of had a feeling I wasn't cut out for the normal right stuff, if you will, and always thought that someday I'd grow up, build my own spaceship. This is how you get into the suit. This is just an airtight bag, and believe it or not, it's kind of like a bread sack. I'm gonna wear it Depends. He'd be another great sponsor. I'm going to go up in this test rocket. The idea is to go straight up 15,000 feet, and then I'll bail out and I'll do a regular skydive. And this opens up a potential for what I call rocket skydiving, which would be a new way of skydiving where you'd set up literally drop zones that didn't use airplanes, but people would be shot up on catapult launch rockets that would take them to jump altitude in a minute as opposed to 15 minutes. One must always learn, I gotta pop my ears, to release the pressure before I open your face mask or you'll blow your eardrums.
It's important little tricks like that that Brian has come to space school to learn. That, and also to find out whether he has the right stuff. Zero Gravity Training 101, it has to be admitted, is a bit of a challenge, particularly the losing your lunch part. Undaunted, Brian went on to his graduation test. Not for the faint-hearted, this whirligig is a Russian centrifuge that lets him feel what it'll be like overcoming the Earth's pull when he finally rockets skyward.
I did training in Russia in the centrifuge, and the doctor that monitored my life signs said that if I had actually been training for a Soyuz launch, they would have certified me for a Soyuz launch. So I built my own centrifuge here so I could get used to the G-forces I'm going to encounter and know that I can operate any of the emergency things that I might need to.
So now, Brian's the only guy around with his own private centrifuge.
This is the business end that powers it. This is just a little ultralight engine, and when this thing's spinning, the propeller produces thrust, and that causes this whole thing to spin. The kill switch and throttle are radio control, so I can control it from the cockpit or someone can control it from the outside. And if you push it around here...
Who would have thought you could have such fun with little more than an old mower engine and an oversized weather vane? Mind you, fun is maybe not quite the right word. Eight G's is a lot of G's. When you're at 8 G's, you've got to fight to keep your throat open because it wants to flatten. And you don't have any muscles to reopen it if it does flatten. So, 8 G's is 8 times your normal body weight. You can't even lift your arm. Whoa! that was quite an experience. It's all carbon fiber and epoxy, so it's very lightweight and very strong. And since I don't have to deal with re-entry heat, that's one question people have is like, well, coming back, why aren't you going to get hot from re-entry? No, because I won't be traveling orbital velocity. A returning space shuttle or a returning spacecraft has been traveling 17,500 miles an hour as it orbits the Earth, and it relies solely on atmospheric friction to slow down. So the heat generated by that friction is what causes such crucial problems. I don't have to deal with any of that, so this thing does not have to be able to withstand that kind of heat. The rocket itself is a very simple rocket. It uses a monopropellant, hydrogen peroxide. Basically, most rockets use a bipropellant, and you mix the two in a chamber and you ignite it, and there's lots of fire and flame, and it's quite tricky. That's why I chose this particular fuel. It really is the safest means that I can use. And as if blasting skyward wasn't a scary enough proposition by itself, Brian is practicing his jumps and calmly looking forward to an additional adrenaline rush, realizing Isaac Newton's best remembered law: what goes up must come down.
Well, my ultimate goal is to just basically fulfill a dream I've had since a child and do something that's considered by most people to be either undoable or just totally extraordinary. I get emails from people all over the place, and most of them, 99% of them, are people saying how when they look at my website and they read my story and they see how many times I failed and now I'm going after such a large dream, that this is encouraging to them. And I mean, I've had some emails that have moved me to tears. I got one from a guy that was dying of a terminal illness, and he had a dream the night before he heard my interview on a radio program. He had a dream about being in space, and he said, I won't be there when you launch, but I'll be there in spirit. So that's been an added bonus I never expected.
Meanwhile, at Cape Canaveral West, bits of the super rocket lie in wait to be assembled on the launch pad. But before that day, we need to witness a successful test run and hear the fateful words as we all look skywards, "We have liftoff. Rocket Guy is on his way."
It's landed. Ideal's new astrobase has just landed. Look, the space lock is opening. And here comes the astronaut.
It seems there's a void now. It seems everyone's focused attention on athletes and movie stars and people that live in La La Land. And the kind of feedback I get from people is that there's a real hunger out there to see people doing things independently that are just big. I think there's a real need out there for people to see the kind of progressive steps that were more obvious, let's say, during the early days of the space program, and have just some real hope attached to it. So, if anything, if I can be thought of as a kind of person that encourages others through his own actions to go after their dreams, to not allow the naysayers and the pessimistic types to drag them down, that, you know, you can do almost anything if you put your mind to it, that's the way I'd like to be remembered. Who knows, there may be some kid that gets so enthused about what I'm doing that 10 years or 20 years from now he goes on to cure cancer. And they may ask him, what was your motive for doing this? And he'll say, well, when I was a kid, this guy, he built his own rocket and shot himself into space. And that was so encouraging to me that I figured I'm going to go out and do something big.
Rocket guy, high above the earth. Rocket guy.